The Israeli military has launched airstrikes on the southern suburbs of Beirut early this morning, the first strikes there in 6 days. The attack was preceded by an early morning evacuation warning, leaving residents less than an hour to flee. Israel says it is targeting Hezbollah assets in the residential suburbs where the militant group has a strong presence. It comes after the U.S. said it opposes the way Israel is conducting the campaign. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected calls for a ceasefire in Lebanon. Journalist Karim El-Gawari is monitoring the situation in Beirut. I asked him about the latest strikes on the Lebanese capital.
Yeah, first strikes since 6 days. This morning, this was 2 or 3 explosions in the southern suburbs. Israel is saying they were targeting a weapons cache of Hezbollah. The interesting or important thing here is that this happened only a few hours after the Israeli Prime Minister Makati got assurances from the US that Israel will not target Beirut any longer. But the focus of the Israeli airstrikes today was further south in the city of Nabati. That's about an hour by car south of Beirut. Heavy airstrikes this morning, and it seems like that the city council building was hit. There are reports that the mayor of this town, this is the biggest town in the southern parts of Lebanon, that the mayor of this town was killed in this strike too. There's until now a count of 5 people dead, but we expect it to rise.
Now, as you were just saying, Israel maintains that it is striking Hezbollah targets, but at the same time, scores of medical workers have been killed in recent weeks in Lebanon. You've been talking to them about the difficult circumstances they're facing.
Yeah, the numbers are breathtaking. The Ministry of Health says that there were about 150 paramedics and health workers killed since the beginning of the war, but the majority of them really in the last 3 weeks. We went yesterday to the operation room of the Lebanese Red Cross here. We're talking about them, with them about the challenges. They have about 300 ambulances and crews all over the country, and they were talking how difficult it is. They themselves were lucky until now. They had only 6 of their people injured. That was when they were rescuing people from a building, and there was a secondary Israeli strike nearby. That was when these paramedics of the Lebanese Cross were injured. But other medical services, especially in the south, have much higher death tolls here. And we talked to the head of the operation. They said one of the most frustrating things is really that very often they cannot get to the injured. They have to basically wait till they get clearance that the ways are safe, and only then they can move. And that, he said, very often for the people who are injured is then help that is coming too late.
It sounds like some truly harrowing conditions for the medical staff in Lebanon. And with the high civilian death toll, some are drawing parallels between the current strikes in Lebanon and the situation in Gaza. What exactly is your assessment of the situation?
Well, pattern seems to be very similar. Now we have an increased geographical location that is under evacuation order by the Israeli army. The UN is talking about that it's about by now a quarter of the country. UNICEF just released new numbers saying that we have about nearly 500,000 children alone who had to escape from these areas. And mind you, when they call an area and say like that it has to evacuate, it means that everyone in this area, in the mind of the Israeli army, becomes a legitimate target. Now, I talked, for example, also to refugee families who were saying, like, we had to, of course, leave people back because we have livestock, we have fields, people have to attend to this livestock, and they're going to stay back. So in the sense of the Israeli army, they are all now, through this evacuation orders, becoming a legitimate target. And that's a pattern that's repeating itself, and that we know is a pattern we can see in the Gaza Strip now since more than a year.
Well, it does seem as if history is repeating itself to a certain extent. That was journalist Karim El-Gawari in Beirut. Many thanks for your reporting.
You're welcome.
With already more than 1 million people being displaced, many are seeking shelter in Beirut, finding refuge anywhere they can. DW's Haret Hreik reports from the Lebanese capital.
This is one of the fanciest nightclubs in Beirut. It's a destination club for Lebanese people and tourists. Up there is a Sky Bar where the evenings begin with a cocktail or two or maybe more. And later you come down here to Skin on the ground floor where the music is really loud and parties are long. I've been here a couple of times myself. People would dance there all night, until a couple of weeks ago. The club now hosts a very different crowd. People on the dance floor are not looking for fun, but for safety. They've come from the southern suburbs of Beirut and southern Lebanon, fleeing Israeli military strikes. The bar no longer serves drinks. The club's furniture now serves as makeshift beds. It's Hussein's second week in this shelter. He came here with his pregnant wife and her family.
We've left home, my childhood neighbourhood. I played in every corner with my friends. I have wonderful memories from there. As you can see, it's in ruins now. People who visited the area told me my house is gone. We got married 4 months ago and hadn't even properly moved into our apartment. I really hope that the war ends soon. I want my son to be born in peace. I don't want him to be born on the streets. I foresee that this is going to be another Gaza, but I hope to be wrong.
Just outside, Gael coordinates food and medicine for the 400 refugees Skin is hosting. She was the club manager and is adapting to being a shelter manager.
It's very new for us, we never did this. We're not an NGO, but we are learning. We're trying to provide for everyone. We're trying, to get the children to feel a little bit safe, since they're not home, no toys for them, not in their usual environment. So we are trying to do this now.
But there are new problems. A doctor is visiting the shelter. Something is wrong.
I'm here to examine people who experience symptoms like itching. And in shelters with displaced person, there is so many infectious disease with a high percentage of transmission, like scabies. And in this shelter, I found several cases of scabies. And now we have to treat this displaced person.
The medication to treat scabies is very limited in Lebanon, Dr. Fida tells me. She's managed to get enough for the people in this shelter for now. But diseases like this rampage through populations of displaced people living in unhygienic and stressful situations. And there are many, many such people in Lebanon right now.
I'm joined now by Sabina Abiad, who is the regional campaign lead for Action Aid in Lebanon. Welcome to DW.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. So Israeli strikes have just hit Beirut for the first time in days. What exactly are you hearing on the ground?
Yes, that's true. After a couple of pause, Israeli airstrikes are hitting again Beirut. And I can tell you, the situation is deteriorating quickly with Israeli airstrikes and displacement order expanding into more region in Lebanon, including densely populated areas, further devastating the critical infrastructure and leaving civilians increasingly vulnerable. In just the last 3 weeks, violence has intensified in Lebanon, causing widespread civilian casualties, mass displacement. The displacement is reaching more than 1 million, and extensive destruction all over Lebanon, making this period one of the deadliest period in Lebanon's recent history. So I think what we are seeing in the last 3 to 4 weeks is a dramatic escalation that is happening. The impact is unbelievable in a way. People are suffering. local civilians are being forced to flee place after place in search for safety. There are now few safe places in Lebanon. You can see entire regions and buildings lying into ruins. And a lot of people have been relocated or displaced multiple times, searching for safety and seeking shelter in refugees. There are now more than 1,000 shelters opened and supported by the Lebanese government and international and local organizations. But the needs are really high. The needs are growing hour by hour. Day by day. Also, there are a lot of vulnerabilities. There is a high risk of GBV in shelters. So the situation is really dire and alarming, and preventing a full-scale humanitarian crisis is closing rapidly in Lebanon.
Well, as you were talking about right there, the civilian toll is astounding, and there are over 1 million people displaced. So what exactly do organizations like yours need to help get these people the help they need?
I would say everything is needed to support the more than 1 million people internally displaced. First, we are supporting them as ActionAid. We are working with our local partners across different locations in Lebanon to support people with the basic needs like food, mattresses, blankets, hygiene kits, dignity kits. So everything is needed. People were forced to flee their homes with nothing in hand, no medicine, no clothes, nothing. And as you may know, we are heading to winter, so the needs also will be growing. They need water to drink, they need the water to take shower. So basically, we need everything. And of course, we need support and funds to keep providing the support to internally displaced people in this dire situation.
Yeah, it does sound like it is a truly dire situation. That was Sabina Abiad from ActionAid in Lebanon. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Tens of thousands of Syrian refugees in Lebanon are being forced back to their war-torn homeland to escape Israel's bombing campaign against Hezbollah. The journey is long, dangerous, and costly, with Syria split between Bashar al-Assad's government and rebel forces. Many Syrians are heading to the opposition-controlled northwest, fleeing to both avoid Israeli attacks and the threat of government repression. DW's Omar Albam reports from a refugee camp in rebel-held Idlib.
Slowly, Fawzia enters a tent she barely knows in this camp north of Idlib. She's back in Syria after being forced to uproot her life a second time. Fawzia fled the conflict in Lebanon to come here, an area governed by the Syrian opposition. She says she lost her identification papers on the journey, a trip that cost her hundreds of dollars paid to smugglers.
We fled Syria because of the bombing, and then the Israeli bombing came to us. So we returned and fled here. We prefer to sit here in a tent for fear of sitting there in Lebanon. They bombed indiscriminately. I stayed in Lebanon for 13 years, and when the Israeli bombing came, we left with the rest of the displaced from Lebanon. The smuggler came and took us through rough roads and wilderness on a journey that lasted about 2 weeks.
The UN says more than 3,000 people have fled to northwestern Syria since Israel increased its attacks in Lebanon last month. Others are still waiting to make the voyage. The journey is long and difficult, with Syria's various government-aligned and rebel forces all charging those fleeing to cross the areas under their control. Fawzia is trying to adapt in her new home with the help of some necessities provided by relatives living in the camp for years already.
Half of my family is here, and the other half is there in Lebanon. They're moving from place to place. For 14 years, we have been living in agony, carrying our belongings and leaving in search of safety. We have nothing. We left our home in Syria and fled to Lebanon, and now we have left our homes in Lebanon and fled again.
With a precious store of medications, Fauzia is trying to make the best of her difficult circumstances. After the repeated misery of flight and displacement, she fears she may not have much time left to rebuild what war and crises have stolen from her.
Tanya Evans, who is the International Rescue Committee's country director for Syria, told us more about the situation there.
What we're seeing at the moment is a large influx of individuals coming from Lebanon who are fleeing escalations there and entering into Syria. They are entering through the Lebanese-Syrian border, and then we're seeing movement taking place across the country. Numbers are difficult to land on precisely. There is a lot of discrepancy in the numbers that are being provided, but we do know that individuals are moving across all parts of Syria in search of safety at the moment. The situation is very, very complex, and the situation takes place in an already very, very dire situation inside Syria. IRC has teams on the ground at various crossing points, and what we're hearing and seeing through protection monitoring is that there is an increased level of anxiety and stress amongst individuals who are entering into Syria and moving across the country, with great need for mental health and psychosocial support.